Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 151 of Speaking from the Heart. And today we're going to play Truth or Dare. So what's your choice? Truth or Dare? I'm sure that many of us have played this game in not so conventional ways, which we're not going to be that promiscuous on today's episode. But I'm sure that many of you have always weighed what the choice you should make be. Truth, if you're not familiar with the game, is when you want to have a question answered that somebody else has asked that is not only straightforward and honest, but you're hoping that they tell it like it is, regardless of what kind of answer that you're expecting. While dare, on the other hand, is a little bit more risque. It might be challenging someone to go into the status quo and stepping outside of that in order to be able to do what they're asked to do. Well, I don't think I'm going to give you either of those choices today because I want you to be challenged. I want you to take the dare. Because when we challenge ourselves to act on the choice that we make, even if we're waffling on that choice, do you still act on it, regardless of what happens? Or are you one of those people that hesitate to carry it through? Sometimes fear is the benefiting factor that doesn't allow us to keep pushing that concept forward, which is why we need to keep challenging ourselves. We have to make that commitment. Usually we have coaches that help us with that commitment to keep on pursuing what we set out to do. When there are roadblocks or other obstacles along the way, either we can move them ourselves or enlist the help of others that will help us to move it out of the way. Maybe even talk ourselves through that process in order to maximize those results, learn some lessons from it, and keep moving forward towards that challenge that we're trying to do. Think of it even as a Spartan race, or even a Tough Mudder, which I'd done a number of years ago. 12 years ago, to be exact, excuse me. But I know that for many of us, we might not be in great physical fitness. We might not be mentally prepared to be able to take on those challenges today. But just like we were talking about in episode 149, if we're willing to make that time and put it aside, we're able to create some of those opportunities that we normally wouldn't think about. We wouldn't be able to do. But yet we're able to do it because we're pushing forward. But what if we were able to really challenge the status quo of why it's so difficult to move through these structures, these things that stand in our way, to be able to challenge ourselves on making the choices that we need to make? Because sometimes we feel like it's comfortable. My therapist would always put it as, Josh, you always like to be in the warm and squishy. You don't like to challenge the status quo. That's why it's sometimes tough for you to be able to overcome some of these thought patterns, these limiting beliefs, if you will, to keep on pushing forward. Now, I'm not any psychologist, and I don't claim to be even with my clients. I'm not here for therapy. I'm here to hold you accountable, to help you overcome that status quo and keep charging ahead, regardless of what happens. But in a more reasonable way, if you will. Because we all have limiting beliefs of some form or fashion, and which my guest Jenny Jansen even talked about, is that we have different chairs that we sit in, depending on where we are at in our life, and which absorb the different modalities, the different information that we are able to connect with. Whether we are able to work through that or make that something that holds us back is a completely different kind of concept, a completely different type of topic that we don't necessarily need to get into today. But I'm not asking you today to play a game of Truth or Dare with your friends or spin the bottle and make that happen. Absolutely not. Because part of what it means to be challenged is that we have to also realize that there might be some weaknesses. And in order to overcome those weaknesses and to turn them into strengths, there is a road or a path, if you will, that we have to walk through, or walk on for that matter, to get to where we need to be. That path can be filled with all kinds of crevices, all kinds of peaks and valleys, all kinds of obstacles in which we're trying to overcome. But regardless of what those things are, Are we able to grow and get to the other side in a more thoughtful, contemplative manner than we originally would have in the first place? In other words, are we able to see growth from where we were in the very beginning of that path all the way to the very end of that path? And that is sometimes the biggest reflection point that even for my clients, I try to take on that journey to let them see that sometimes that hard work, that inability for them to sometimes see what they're seeing in the mirror come alive. When somebody challenges you to do something, it isn't always a negative thing. Sometimes the negativity that is associated with being challenged means that they're being threatened. We're feeling like we're insecure about ourselves because somebody has pointed out one of our weaknesses, something that we're not doing well for that matter. We're not receptive to constructive feedback. And we're not able to really work through what we got going on internally. A combination of all those factors, amongst so many other external factors like our culture, our society, what we digest in podcasts, books, things of that nature, can all manifest into something that we're not so crazy about. We're not really interested in being able to do what we want to do, because even if we want to overcome those challenges and prove that that other person is wrong, we might have some hesitation as to what it might look like on the other side. And for that, not only is it hard for us to keep that commitment, that's where most people fall off. Never get back on that wagon or even on that horse to keep on riding on that path forward. And that is such a shame. I know that there's a lot more to it, and I'm making it really simplistic, especially in a world that has many different scenarios. That's why I've always said, there isn't one-size-fit-all coaches out there, and you have to do your research as it relates to even working with people that will help you become who you need to be. Whether you're trying to write a book or even work on yourself, there are plenty of empowerment coaches and authors that are coaches as well that will help you with each of those different types of perspectives. There are even therapist coaches. There are people that are willing to work with you if you're Airbnb, in which we recently had Julie Thomas on the show talking about her experiences with her husband starting that Airbnb business. But it's not easy. What it means for many people is that you have to overcome some of the stereotypes, some of the stigmas that are laying you down on the path and not allowing you to get back up, because that is what is letting you be defined. You're not letting anybody else tell you what you should be listening to, and maybe, just maybe, you're not letting yourself accept what they have to say, amongst other things for that matter. And boy, oh boy, did I ever feel like I never been accepting of what other people had to say for such a long time. You know, it's been a long road to get here, especially even as a podcast host or even a coach of a business coaching company that is really trying to continuously build itself into the best version of who they are. It's really important to think about what is the opportunities that exist, not only in our own lives, but also what it means to keep on pushing the needle forward. We've talked about this needle in numerous episodes, and it comes in different shapes and sizes. The forms in which it may manifest might be from things that have happened in our past, present, or even what we anticipate in the future. But to be able to do that, we actually have to physically, mentally challenge ourselves to realize that that game of truth or dare can yield so many different types of opportunities if we're willing to face those questions, if we're willing to put those actions behind the dares that we are given. And even if you think that it's impossible to do, especially with all the limitations, whether they're financial, whether they're social, cultural, or some other norm, let me tell you that those are only things that we have manifested over hundreds of centuries to get to where we are at today. And as a result of that, you are not controlled by a lot of those things that are happening. Now, I'm sure you're saying it right now. Josh, you are absolutely off your rocker. Do you really think that finances are really made up? I have to pay in United States dollars. I have ruples and Canadian money for that matter. Do I just disregard all those systems and I just live a free will life, bartering my way through the rest of everything that I'm doing? Should I be going back and churning butter? Should I go and try to make clothes out of wool and cotton that I picked from the field? Absolutely not in any of those circumstances, because we have come so far as a society. Many of those individual aspects have already been resolved. And in some of my earlier podcast episodes, we've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we're able to even satisfy those basic demands, we're able to then work on the self-actualization, the very top of that pyramid. Regardless of what we have going on in our lives, so many of these things that we're talking about have already been resolved. They've already been worked through, for that matter. We're now on the other side of this. We're able to create opportunities that we never thought we could ever create because we keep on advancing society. But as a result of advancing society, we also are restricted by some of the things that we must abide to. The legal compliance, the currency system that we live by. These, among all kinds of other things, help to dictate what our business is all about. And even with all the things that we do personally, professionally, it guides us in being able to do things that we oftentimes take for granted in today's society. If you never really thought about it, think of it this way. Because of all the things that have happened in the past with other individuals, we're able to do what we're able to do today. So I challenge you, don't slip back into those olden times. We've been able to work through so many of those things and we should capitalize on it. We've even had episodes where we've talked about utilizing AI, artificial intelligence, to its very best. Because we now have those kinds of tools available to us. We're almost close to a quarter part of this century into it, and we've learned so much about all kinds of different advances, not only in technology, but even in our own society for that matter. What we had valued back then is not the same values that we have today. But that happened because change had to occur, but also people were challenged to be able to create a new version of themselves. The consequences of our choices, whether it's through action or inaction, are totally up to us to decide. You, as an individual, have this ability to see what's inside your chest, that light that is willing to expand, if you're willing to let it expand, to create infinite number of possibilities that you otherwise would have never seen before. So why not act on change? Why not be challenged by it and allow it to enter through you and sit with it? It's a really simple question with a very complex answer. And I'm sure that even today, even with all the things that you have going on in your life, and even having this realization after listening to this, there are many thoughts that run through you. But let me make it as simple as possible as to ways in which you can manifest this change today. First off, just live in it. Live in what those feelings are. Maybe they're not so good. Maybe they are good. Regardless of what it is, sit in it and don't let it consume you. Feel it through your fingertips, your toes, your ligaments, all the different parts of your body, even if it's residing in your heart, even in your brain, or even in other places. Even if you feel like it's something that is such a burden, let it have you. Once you let it have you, write down all the things that you could ever think of with that energy that you now have to keep on pushing that needle forward. Your needle is an important contribution to the overall needles in which move society forward. Find something that will challenge you. Don't stay stagnant. That isn't allowing you to be able to make choices that will help. Instead, it's making you sway back and forth with nervousness, maybe even hurting you in the long run. Time is such a precious commodity, as we even have talked about recently. But if you're able to feel like you're challenged in a positive way, and you're able to use that positivity to spread greatness and joy, especially in the things that you have gifts with, that might be the best way in which you can start making progress right now. But even if you feel uncertain and you're not sure of how those opportunities challenge your position and how they help you, seek out help. Don't sit in it with just thinking that all those things that you have just felt have to go to the wayside because you have other things that you have to accomplish. Reach out to somebody, even if it's a friend or family member or even your significant other. Talk to them about it. Get earnest feedback, but more importantly, set the expectation of what you want to receive back. Part of being challenged is to also acknowledge that that other person needs to know what you need to be challenged in to become even greater than you are today. So if you are able to convey that to them, that's a great start. But as always, I'm here to help you just as much as all my other coaching friends are as well, regardless of what kinds of challenges that you might face. Even if the choices are very difficult and you're still wavering back and forth as to figuring out what are the ways that you can move forward, just know that you are part of a collective that is also feeling the same, whether they say it out loud or not. Because if we're able to pursue these opportunities, if we're able to keep pushing ourselves forward by being challenged in a positive way, we're going to be able to unlock doors that we otherwise would have never walked through before. But even more importantly, we're going to be able to create so many different opportunities that others will get to enjoy as well. Because we're all in this together, why do it alone? It doesn't mean that you have to share your wealth, almost like a communist nation. It doesn't mean that you have to be socialist either. A kind act goes a long way. And sometimes kindness, through challenging each other, can help us get through any type of game, even if it is truth or dare, in our own lives. But also to overcome the consequences, because they're not negative. They're just something that are stepping stones on that path that you've been walking on to create the best version of yourself. Thanks for listening to episode number 151 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.